Once upon a time, in a land not too far from your own, across the bay, your professor was a teenager who needed to do research. And what I needed to do research is I had to wait for the library to be open. And then I had to get dressed because I couldn't actually walk around in my PJs. And I had to make sure I looked, oh, so cute, just in case you know who was at the library. Then I had to use these things called card catalogs where I pulled them out and researched a single word like turtle or politics and try to figure out research that I could do a report on. It was frustrating, it was long, but there was one benefit. Most of what I found in the library, I'd say 98% of it, I could consider credible. It's not something that we have today. So we're going to talk a little bit about developing criteria to evaluate sources. We're going to talk about the why, the what, the how, and of course, we're going to start out with the where. So where do we start? Well, we all know it's midnight, we're in our PJs, we're eating cereal and half watching anime, and we go to Google. We go to Google and look stuff out, and maybe a couple of you have even heard of Google Scholar. Probably about half of you have heard about that, and we'll talk about that during this lecture. But the number one place that y'all should be looking for information is right underneath your fingertips, and it is the school library, and it is online, and it is 24 hours. Now, I know that research can sometimes be frustrating, and sometimes we know that there's got to be research out there on this topic, but we just are having such a tough time finding it. And that's why you want to go and ask a librarian. Librarians are not just book jockeys being paid minimum wage to put away your books. They're actually content and database knowledge experts. They have to get a master's in library science to even call themselves a librarian. And these are a student's best friends, let me tell you. I don't know where I'd be without mine. So think about a librarian. If you're having difficult times formulating a great thesis, figuring out the research in order to find this information, they're going to be your best friend. But why should I even bother doing research? Well, this is kind of a silly question, isn't it? Obviously, we don't know everything. And I hate to break it to you, but you never will. But I hope you try to prove me wrong. It's to discover new things, to establish what a fact is. Not everything that we hear that's said as factual is a real fact. To make an informed opinion. When it comes to voting, things can get very convoluted. A lot of times we really don't know what's going to happen. So the best thing we can do is make an educated guess. And, well, to avoid looking foolish. Like, for example, these folks. This is in reference to the Trump child separation policy. And let's see what they have to say.
Forced. My question was, whose responsibility is it now to reunite the children that were separated by the president's policies?
It's Congress's responsibility to fix this problem. This has been going on. It was going on during the Obama administration. It was going on then. It just wasn't happening
to this level at the Obama administration.
Happening. It absolutely was, Victor.
It absolutely
the media was not covering
That is just a clear fact, Amy. We can talk about perspectives. We can talk, but there are numbers. There's research. There were people who worked in the Obama administration. There were immigration attorneys who were working then or are working now. Any nonpartisan, objective fact checker says that what you are telling people right now is not true.
You are wrong.
There was absolutely no policy of zero tolerance that required families to be separated.
Victor, you're wrong. Jeh Johnson, the Department of Homeland Security under President Obama, said on Thursday that they were separating families, and they actually were asking Mexico to enforce their southern border.
There were no families separated.
That's not correct. That's not correct.
The interview was here.
Victor, that's not correct. Go read the transcript.
The control room is watching this. We'll get the soundbite and we'll play it for the viewers.
Okay.
We will settle this one. All right, and here's Jeh Johnson.
There's no policy or practice, at least on my watch, to separate women, parents from their children.
There might be individual cases of it?
There were, I'm sure, individual cases for reasons of health or safety. But we did not have that policy or practice, and it's not something I would have adopted. It's not something I would have permitted.
Fact. Amy
Victor,
Kremer.
Okay, well,
so
I don't have the ability to pull up what I read, but it happened.
Tweet it.
I will. Actually, I will.
Thank you,
on
Amy.
my Twitter feed. Thanks, Victor.
I'm sorry. I got a little distracted with my phone while you all were watching that. Remind me what is said. She says Jeh Johnson absolutely said this in an interview. They showed her the interview, and she obviously said, well, I must have misremembered. Or she didn't say that. She absolutely doubled down and said, absolutely, it happened. I just can't tweet it right now. I can't pull it up right now. She claimed that it was Jeh Johnson. She claimed that it was in an interview. And when proven wrong, why didn't she want to admit she was wrong? Or was it even a mini? Did she even believe that she was wrong? Well, a lot of us may have heard about this before. It's called confirmation bias, sometimes known as my side bias. And it's our tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms one's pre-existing beliefs or hypothesis. And we're all guilty of this, as am I. am absolutely guilty of this all the time. A lot of times I can pull up information when it confirms what I want to believe. And yet, if it doesn't, it's harder for me to remember. Now, this kind of confirmation bias can really hurt us when we are doing research. And why is that? Well, it's the questions that we ask. It's what we put into our search engine. If we put in climate change is faked, what's going to show up? If I put in how rich is Donald Trump, what am I assuming? Hermione Granger is the true hero of the Harry Potter series. What kind of websites am I going to pull up? That it was Ron Weasley? I don't think so. Well, and that last one is what we call a litmus test. Absolutely, the Navy is the best U.S. military branch. Now, I kind of lied to you about one of these. No, it's not the Navy one. That's absolutely true, and I can mathematically prove it. But it's that climate change is faked. Google a few years ago decided to change its algorithm so that when somebody comes in and puts up that climate change is faked, these are the websites that pull up. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely believe in climate change. I believe that it's man-made. However, I'm not sure how I feel about a profit company deciding what I can and cannot see. That being said, this is why we need to be careful about what we search. Just so you know, these are the 3 websites that do come up. And as you can tell, none of them are falling into that confirmation bias. But there's still a lot of things that do. So if Google's not perfect, and, well, let's be honest, they're doing it for the almighty dollar, where should I be looking? Well, library is your best friend. I'm so sorry. I'm so happy to say that. EBSCOhost, CQ Researcher, Academic Search, all of these things you can find under the database. And a lot of these very expensive journals and search engines, the library and California community colleges are paying for. So you get access to all sorts of stuff. There's also academic texts, including textbooks and popular books. And there is the open internet. Google Scholar is a acceptable website. Now, I will tell you, when you go to Google Scholar, you will notice that there's no ads. Google has absolutely no financial reason to keep the Google Scholar web search being just Google Scholar. So it's something to think about. There's also popular press sources, New York Times, The Economist, but every single one of these sources could be wrong. And so you all have to start thinking critically about what you're reading. There's also a truth that a lot of things use loaded language. Here's some of those popular press sources. You got Washington Post and you got Wall Street Journal. They're both talking about the exact same event. Arizona governor vetoes controversial anti-gay bill. Arizona governor vetoes religious freedom bill. Head back over to the language and speeches. Sounds a lot like loaded language, isn't it? So are all sources good? Well, no, of course they're not. But how can we better judge if a source is good? Well, we're going to look for the following clues: the date, the name, the publisher, and we're going to follow links back, hyperlinks, that is. So when we talk about date of publication, newer is better, but we should really question what makes a source old. For example, if we're talking about the combustible engine that we have in cars, honestly, is even 30 years all that old when we're talking about that? However, if we're talking about COVID, definitely newer is better. But this can also be used against us. If we're talking about a, disaster that's going on right now and somebody is live tweeting it, that doesn't always mean that it's the perfect information. So we have to critically think about it. Look for the author and what and who and what they are. Look for qualifications. A great example of this is just a nice screenshot from the Washington Post, and we have a name, Katie Metler. I'm able to click on that name because it is a hyperlink and follow back and see all their different stories and articles that they've written for the Washington Post. But like many journalists today, they do have to self-promote. So here we have her on what was at the time Twitter with a nice little blue check mark. Now, this is one of the bigger issues that's going on right now. When Elon Musk bought Twitter and turned it into X, he made the blue check mark something you could buy. Now suddenly conspiracy theorists and tabloid writers and heck, the average 10-year-old kid could buy a check mark and claim to be all sorts of people or claim to be verified. It's important for us to realize how much damage this did to credibility and our ability to judge what is true and what is not. But most journalists will have published information on social media guides, and there's still Threads and Instagram and Blue Sky that you can look to. Now, are all sources good? One of the other things we could do is we could look for quotes. If someone credible is quoted, Google the quote. And if it is highly inflammatory, trust me, other people are going to be talking about it. A lot of Trump's tweets during his first presidency, if he said something incredibly inflammatory, trust me, it was getting a lot of news coverage. However, a lot of people also used to fake his tweets. Just go ahead and put it into a search engine and figure out if you can find it, right? Don't believe everything you read on the internet. Pictures can be exceptionally useful. And if there's a picture, sometimes doing reverse image search can help you out. Now, here is a quick little video where I show you how to do reverse image search. Now, you can on Google. So you'll see that I'm going to images.google.com. You can on Chrome, right click, and it will actually do an image search as well. And I found that on my iPhone, I can take a picture of it and then search by Google Images. But on this one, I literally just find a picture of Oprah during her Meghan Markle interview, and I can find a lot of other pages with it. Another one is TinEye. TinEye for the straight guy is not actually this website, but they do a nice little job of it too. You can post a picture and look, all of those pictures come through. Really easy to figure out if a photo is true or not. Photos are actually really powerful ways to figure out the bias of any sort of article. It could be that the larger website is biased, or it could be that the article is. But let's look at these two pictures. We've got one of President Trump and one of Secretary Clinton. And what do you think? Do you think that the President Trump article is positive or negative? What about the Secretary Clinton? Well, the first one, absolutely a positive article on Trump, and the second one, absolutely a negative article on Clinton. You can see it other places. I always found this really interesting. I grabbed this picture because I thought it made him look rather regal, but a lot of people say that it makes him look kind of evil with his eyes kind of darkened out. And I love this picture simply to show it because we do see things differently based on our experiences. But this one, on the other hand, it's pretty clear to know that the article was going to be negative. I'll be honest, a lot of these pictures I found by looking up bad pictures of Clinton, pictures of Trump from InfoWars, stuff like that. But this one was right on the head of, I'm going to pause just for a second, y'all. So this picture particularly, I found on the cover of Yahoo. It was from a Independence, I think, article that was on the head of their website for a while. And I don't think I need to tell you exactly if that's positive or negative. Here's some other pictures that are a great example of how pictures can really show off a bias. The one on the right of President Trump, it got a lot of notification when it was taken. And the one on the left, Biden, I just thought was a nice juxtaposition. But just because we see it doesn't always mean it's real either. Let's check out this quick video of maybe one of your favorite movie stars. Let's watch.
Yeah, I'll be right there, Steve. Hey, what's up, TikTok? Look, I do a lot of my own stunts, but I also do a lot of industrial cleanup, okay? It's important. So, obviously you keep your hands clean, but you need that exfoliating product to really cut through the grime, okay? Just another tip for you talkers, or the TikTok tips. I'm getting too old for that. I don't, internet.
Well, with Mission Impossible just coming out, the face of Tom Cruise isn't hard to recognize. But is it really Tom Cruise? The truth of the matter is that this is a great example of a deep fake. And just because you see it with your eyes doesn't particularly mean that it's real. We need to be better critical thinkers. This was definitely not a problem when I was in high school. So finally, we should look at the following clue. Find out about the publisher. I mean, there's a lot of websites I've never heard of. Sleep Institute, open sources, Medium website. Are these good or bad? Well, I don't know, but you need to. If you're going to use a source, you better know if they're reputable. Here's a great example of a website that was actually pushed by a lot of professors and teachers early on in around 2015, 2016. And it's called Media Bias Fact Check. However, the Columbia Journalism Review describes Media Bias Fact Check as an amateur attempt at categorizing media bias, and Van Zandt as an armchair media analyst. Wikipedia is wonderful to get into the heart of some of these organizations, some of these websites. Also, you might check out the About Us. A lot of times they're very clear. Hey, we're a for-profit company trying to sell you mattresses. And so that's why we're known as Sleep Institute. We have to think a little bit more critically. Medium.com is a website that I do see a lot of people quote nowadays. But the problem is that the platform is an example of social journalism, having a hybrid collection of amateur and professional people and publications or exclusive blogs. So you really have to know who is writing. Being on Medium, I could write on Medium. You could write on Medium. And in fact, there's been some pretty shady stuff put on Medium. It's important for us to know the quality of our sources. Here's a great example of that happened in Congress.
Is the Azov battalion getting access to U.S. weapons?
Not that I'm aware of, but if you have information,
I'd seek unanimous consent to enter into the record the Global Times investigative report that talks about training. It's from the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensics Research Lab.
I'm sorry, is this the Global Times from China?
No, this is...
Well, that's what you read.
Yeah, it might be. Yeah, would that be a reason?
As a general matter, I don't take Beijing's propaganda at face value.
Fair enough. I would agree with that assessment.
And yet suddenly, Mr. Gates is kind of feeling a little foolish, isn't it? So the other thing that we can do, a lot of times you'll notice that there are hyperlinks in articles, and sometimes they'll lead you exactly back to where they found the information. A good example of this is a couple of years ago that John Legend and Chrissy Teigen got involved in the Pizzagate conspiracy theory. It's a pretty ridiculous conspiracy theory saying that people are selling children by using pizza descriptions out of a pizzeria in Washington, D.C. / Virginia. It did result in somebody bringing guns to the pizzeria and trying to fire weapons into the basement where he thought the children were being held. He spent 4 years in jail for that, by the way, got out and said, well, I guess it wasn't fully vetted. Wasn't even willing to admit that he was wrong. There's that confirmation bias again. But in this article, you'll notice that the article is talking about Liz Crokin, who was at the National Enquirer. There's a nice link there that you can follow back and prove that point. You also have the tweets themselves from Chrissy Teigen, which I did click on. And yes, she had taken pictures of everything that Liz Crokin had said about that Chrissy Teigen wanted to sell her child on the child sex market, which is a really horrible thing to say about anybody. So let's play a little game. You learned a lot of stuff today. Let's find out what we can do with this particular website. It's the Denver Guardian. We've got FBI agents suspected in Hillary email links found dead in apparent murder-suicide. So what are some of the things that I talked about? We talked about the date. Well, it's kind of weird, isn't it? Does anybody see a date? The next thing we talked about was the author. Who wrote it? What are their credentials? And again, on DG staff, but yeah, we see that all the time, right? Encyclopedia Britannica editors, history.com, editors, biography.com. Heck, I've seen BBC staff before. Oh, okay. What else did I talk about? Well, the photographs. Well, this is kind of interesting, isn't it? When you actually look at the photograph, it doesn't really look like a photograph. It looks like a video. If you can see up there in the upper left-hand corner, it's definitely a photograph emoji, not there's no play button on it. That seems really odd, doesn't it? Well, so let's find out what other agencies say about the Denver Guardian. So where should we go? Well, we could go to the About, but I think in this case, Wikipedia is the best thing. The Denver Guardian was a fake news website known for a popular untrue story about Hillary Clinton, posted on the site November 5th, 2016, 3 days before the 2016 US presidential election. The story was shared on Facebook more than 500,000 times and earned more than 15.5 million impressions. How many of us are guilty about looking at the headline and not diving in deeper and suddenly believing it? How many of us are guilty if our friend or a loved one or somebody we respect posted that website? We wouldn't look at it twice. We'd absolutely believe it. Do you think this might have changed the election in 2016? We'll never know. The last thing I want to talk about is books. There's a lot of different books out there, and it's important to acknowledge that there's different prices for creating and publishing books. The most expensive, and every single person listening to this knows this, is those textbooks. Heck, when I was in school, they could easily cost you $300. Easily, heck, $500. Luckily, those you usually got to resell used at the end of the semester, but still, those are expensive to produce. You got hardcover books. Those are always going to be a little bit more expensive, nicer volumes than the paperbacks, which are a little bit cheaper. And, the Beatles want to be a paperback writer. And then finally, the cheapest, of course, is going to be an ebook. So when we're thinking about books, you have to wonder if it's done by a good publisher like Penguin House or Random House, Flat World, which is a communication tech book company. If they put a lot of money into it, that's saying something. If they put no money into it, if it's an ebook, if it's self-published, maybe we should raise our eyebrows just a little bit. So let's play another little game. Here is a book on Amazon. It's a real book, Will and Power, Live Inside the Living Library, Volume 1, first edition. You can definitely buy it as a Kindle, but you can also buy it as a paperback. So what are some of the things that we talked about? Well, books, of course, are a little bit going to be different as far as dates go. So let's move off past that and let's go jump straight to the author. Well, it's Lone Wolf. L-O-A-N, not L-O-N-E, which would be like alone. Loan is more like I'm loaning you this book. I'm not giving it to you. Next thing we could look at is the poster, which definitely looks like something that would be up in my brother's room when he was a teenager. But let's see if we can't dig a little bit deeper on this one. And we'll find out that that's the author. I do not remember his real name, and maybe I don't care. He was part of the January 6th insurrection in Washington, D.C., and spent time in jail for the violence that he perpetrated there. Information sometimes can be a little hard to find out, so Where can we go? We can go to fact checkers. Here's just a couple of them. Snopes is great because it's not always political. If you've ever seen a meme and wondered if the information is true or not, Snopes might be able to help out. But there's other ones, PolitiFact, factcheck.org, and the Berkeley Library has a lot of different checkers out there that you can find out about. Open Secrets is one that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but really isn't. Duke's Reporter Lab, fact checking is wonderful. And of course, I do like my Snopes. The definitive internet reference source for urban legends, folklores, myths, rumors, and misinformation. Finally, coming towards the end, let's chat about domain names. Now, a lot of times we do put a little bit more stock into some names. So we've got .com, you got .org, you got .gov, .edu, sometimes .uk, .jp, .it. How many of these are inherently credible? Well, nothing is 100% credible. And guess what? .edu can be a high school. It can be a junior high school. It doesn't particularly make that a credible source. But one of the ones that I get a lot is .org. So I'm glad to say this website is no longer up, but I just kind of want to dispel that rumor. So if you go to Google and you type in Martin Luther King Jr., now this is probably taken about 2019. So this no longer exists, by the way, which I'm very happy about. But if you put in Martin Luther King Jr., you're going to come up with Wikipedia, biography, history, and then Martin Luther King Jr., a true historical examination, www.martinlutherking.org. Now, there's very few times I'm going to take you on a time travel trip. I took you on one in the beginning of this lecture, and this is the second one, because this is what websites look like in 1999. Now, I don't think that there's a chance any of the students in this class would look at this and say, this looks like a credible website. But back in the 90s and the early 2000s, most websites look like this. However, the language on it, you can very quickly tell that this is not a credible website. And in fact, if you look down here at the bottom, you're going to notice that it's hosted by Stormfront. Stormfront was one of the premier neo-Nazi groups in America, probably until about 2010, where they kind of were absorbed by some of our other neo-Nazi groups in America. Obviously, I don't think the KKK or any association of them are a great source of Martin Luther King Jr. So just because it's .org doesn't mean it's true. Wikipedia, I never want any student to use Wikipedia, but it's an okay place to start, especially if you are kind of trying to get your head around a particular topic or theory when it comes to other classes. Also, they have wonderful references at the end. And if you look at them, look at all of those wonderful links. You can literally pull them up and use those links from, for example, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, TechCrunch, all of these things, which are much better than Wikipedia. So use Wikipedia, but don't reference Wikipedia, if that makes sense. So what did we talk about today? Well, we talked about developing criteria to evaluate your sources. We talked about the why, the what, and the how. I know this was a little bit of a longer lecture, but I'm not sure that there's any more imperative lecture that I'll talk to you about this semester, minus propaganda and logical fallacies. When I was growing up, people didn't believe the world was flat. Nobody believed that autism was caused by vaccines. A few people maybe believe there was something more going on with JFK's murder, but most of us believe that we had landed on the moon. These are things that are only this generation's problem. People who are living right now. So how are we going to stop it?